And our first speaker is Dr. Cesar Corzo. He is currently an associate professor at the University of Minnesota, where he holds the Leman Chair in Swine Health and Productivity and the Morrison Swine Health Monitoring Project Director. He holds a DVM from the Universidad de La Salle in Colombia and a Master's of Science from University of Guelph and a PhD from the University of Minnesota. Dr. Corzo has previously worked with PIC and Elanco. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Corzo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nerim, for that kind of introduction. It is certainly a pleasure to be here to share the first step on this project that Dr. Nerim just talked about. I'm gonna be pretty transparent. He just made my talk way easier because I had some of the background slides in there. So I'm gonna go straight to the point. Very good. Excellent. So just to move us, to try to catch up on the time, this is what I'm going to be talking about. Like I said, Dr. Nerim already touched on some of these principles of where the project started. But let me start with, for those of you who are not familiar with the Minnesota pork industry, I thought I would just throw in some of the slides in here, just so that we can show you more or less what have been the trends, right? So in here, you're going to see what happens with any pork industry, right? Growth over time, right? Now, and we can also see what the share within the whole U.S. industry is. So Minnesota is a very important player in the pork industry in the United States. But also, as industries evolved, when we go back, we have lots of farms, smaller farms. That trend has changed as well, right? As time goes by, everybody gets specialized. We go to multi-site. We have fewer farms, but with larger inventories, right? Again, this is not different to other states within the United States or pretty much every country. So this is important because as we start thinking about elimination of disease, the impact that we can have by eliminating a pathogen from one sow farm is going to have a huge repercussion downstream, right? Now, when we look at, so this is pretty much the sizes of the farms, right? And how big, how many of those per category we have. Again, same story as we were just mentioning about, and it's, again, we have larger farms, fewer farms, but larger farms, right? With more pigs in each site. Now, the interesting thing is that all of these farms, and again, this is just density data used using the source, the USDA source, right? And you can see that pretty much a good portion of the hogs in the state are in southern Minnesota, right? I don't think this is new for the ones that live here in the state or in the Midwest, but for those of you that are out the state or out the country, you can see that a good chunk of the pigs are in southern Minnesota, right? Of course, closer to the grains, closer to the slaughter plants, and of course, there's a lot of movement in between states, right? So I think that's kind of to set the stage where the pigs are, right? Now, when we look at where we are from a state today, everybody can go to, so USDA puts out all these summaries with census data, we want to call it census data. Today in the state, we have roughly 500,000 sows, 490,000 sows, right? It changes year by year. Again, some people say this is not very accurate, but again, we're just going by what USDA says. But then when we look at the growing pig population, and that's divided by weight or age, if you want to put it that way, you can see that they're kind of spread out, right? We have different numbers in different categories. Again, what I get from this table is that we move a lot of pigs around, right? That talks about how many trucks go in and out, but also what age category we have in the state, what stays here or what arrives. So it's important for any kind of disease, because especially when we're talking about mycoplasma late in the finisher, where we see a bit of circulation of the bacteria, that is important to keep in mind, right? Now, I'm going to skip this. Dr. Neri already covered this, but I think this is important to mention just because we've been tasked with helping with this whole initiative, right? So I appreciate the trust the committee has on us, on MSHIP, but I also, like we were talking earlier this morning, as Dr. Minion said, this is part of collaboration, right? So we're collaborating with Minnesota pork producers in this project, and again, with a large group of individuals. And I think there's something important that needs to be said here, and this is I want to call it a low-hanging fruit, right? Because I think, as Dr. Nerem showed, this work has been going on for quite a while now, right? And I think there's a lot of pieces out there, a lot of pieces of information that really justify why we need to get rid of this bacteria. And this is just a few examples, right? Just the cost, right? The cost is, I mean, it's simple to come up with the cost and justify why we need to get rid of this bacteria. So I think we've got interesting pieces out there. But also, at the same time, there has been a lot of epidemiological links that have been sorted out, right? And I'm just showing here a few examples, but I think most importantly, those that Dr. Maria Peters led in the past and that she continues to lead, and it's shedding, length of shedding, right? What do we need to, how are we gonna use that information so that we can start acclimating kills, which is the work that she did with Dr. Fano. Then acclimation, right? I mean, if we wanna start fine-tuning and trying to stabilize those herds, well, acclimation needs to be part of that, right? And then another one is the best approach as far as elimination is concerned. That survival analysis led by Dr. Yeski, I think it kind of told us already, herd closure is the way to go if depup, repop is not an option, right? So I think those are key pieces of the puzzle that were sorted out early in the process that I think has allowed producers and veterinarians to move forward with this initiative, right? I just went on PubMed, and again, I work more with viruses, understanding dynamics and occurrence and elimination, and I just went on PubMed and I did a very quick search on what do we know about the prevalence of Mycoplasma around the world. And again, I didn't do an extensive lit review, but these are the ones that showed up, right? And if you look at this, we're gonna see anything between like 50% by PCR or pretty much nothing by ELISA, right? So you have all the spectrum. Some of these numbers come from national eradication programs to nothing is being done in some countries, right? So I think this is important because if Minnesota continues on this path, we're gonna be getting closer to what Norway and Switzerland have today, which is a competitive advantage, right? Less use of antibiotics, more efficiency, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Now, I used the data from our friends from the swine disease reporting system, and I looked at how often do we see Mycoplasma coming out of that database, right? And I used PCRs, and I also included tissues in there. And then you can see an interesting trend, right? Few years ago, these are bars, number of cases, accession cases. So if you see red, that's positive, right? Positive cases. If you see green, those are negative. As you follow that graph, you can see that the trend is to see less red, right? In other words, are we looking for it enough? I think so. Are we finding it enough? Not really, right? It's not out there. So I think this speaks again to the effort that you as practitioners and producers have been putting to eliminate this bacteria. So again, good and more information to continue to justify this initiative. So having said that, we said, okay, let's go and try to figure out what is our presumed prevalence, right? And what I mean by presume is we're not going to be running diagnostic tests just because we have a short time window, right? So basic epidemiology, let's see how much disease we find out there, right? Simple objective, pretty straightforward. So when we're trying to do this kind of projects, the ideal scenario is for you to try to estimate a prevalence, right? If we have no idea, you would just go with the default, 50%, and then you get your sample size. In this case, we know more or less that the prevalence is gonna be below 50%, but we said, we're not gonna go with the ideal scenario because we don't have the money to start testing, and we wanna keep it simple in this time frame. So let's go with a presumed status, right? And that's why we're using our scenario, right? In which, because we know that efforts have been in place for quite a while in the Minnesota industry, let's just go place some phone calls and ask veterinarians or ask you, what is the status of your sow farms, right? Simple as that. You know pretty much the history of those sow farms. You know whether you eliminated or not, and I'm sure that there's some monitoring being done in those herds. So that'll give us a good degree of confidence, right? So that was our initial step. Let's just start asking. How? Well, let's use the MSHIMP database, right? MSHIMP today has a large network of collaborators. Today we have 3.9 million sows, so we're getting closer to that 65% within the U.S. industry. But within Minnesota, we work with the major producers and major clinics, right? So we started the data gathering process a few months ago, which is phase one, right? So let's talk to MSHIMP participants and ask them that simple question. So that will be our phase one. Phase two, which I think it's already starting, as you heard earlier this morning, there's already that economic model that's already live on the Minnesota Pork Board website. Eventually, we're gonna be able to start asking the smaller producer to share their data with us. So that'll be phase two, so that we can get to as many farms as we can within the state. Now, an important thing is that we have set ourselves a goal, right? By the end of the year, we want to have 75% of the sows accounted for from a Mycoplasma status perspective, right? So I think it's a reachable goal. Again, in a window of time of 6 months, I think it's doable. So let me show you some very simple results, pretty straightforward. Again, these numbers are going to keep changing as we get more farms into the mix, right? So let me remind you of how many sows we have in the state. Again, roughly 490,000. As of today, we have 63% of those sows accounted for from a Mycoplasma status, right? What does that mean? That means those sows are in 107 sow farms, and they represent today 308,000 sows, which I think it's, for us, in a very short period of time, we were able to account a large population very quickly, right? Now, when you look at the sow herd size, you'll see there a very simple histogram on whether you have the small, the medium, the large, it doesn't matter, but I think this is just important for us to have a census of how many sows are we talking about and where are they being housed. Is it large populations, small populations? So there you have it, you have the histogram there. Now, when we look at the presumed status, right? So out of the 107 farms that we have accounted for, you can see that there's 12 that have been classified as positive. That gives us a very simple simple number, which is 11.2%. I think that's pretty low at this point, right? The important thing is that when we look at the positives, just like Dr. Nerim said, there are some herds that are undergoing elimination. So as of now, I am aware of 3 of those 12 farms that are undergoing an elimination program. I still need to check with the other farms, where are they at from an elimination perspective. Now, when we look at the negative herds, and I think Dr. Nerim pretty much gave you the same data, a good amount of these herds have been negative for a while. It's not that this happened from one day to the next. All this work has been happening for more than a decade, right? Just because of that progressive nature of the producer and veterinarians in the state, right? So I think this is very good news, I believe. Now, when you look at where are those sow farms located, and because people will start asking, should I eliminate? Should I not eliminate? Am I going to have a rebreak? Am I going to have a lateral introduction? Well, when you look at Minnesota, and there you have the density, so Dr. Chaumet helped me with this map, you can see where the sow farms are located, right? And those are the sow farms located scattered throughout the state of Minnesota, most of them on southern Minnesota, right? Where most of the pigs are located. And I thought, I can label this by positive, negative, and unknown, but I'm not gonna throw anybody under the bus, and I don't wanna start pointing fingers at anyone, so I'm gonna leave it yellow. But I can tell you that out of those 12 positive sow herds, they're scattered throughout 8 counties. It's not that they're clustered, right? So I think that's an important thing. First point. Second point is that some of those Negative sow farms are located in very high dense counties, right? So I think the question of, are we going to re-break? Are we going to have another introduction? The probability of that happening is pretty low. Yes, there's going to be some herds that are under air filtration, that's fine, but there's others that are not under air filtration and they still remain free of mycoplasma. Now, we continue to put some more metrics to it, right? And as I've been talking to the practitioners and the producers, I always ask them, do you remember when did you have your last break, right? Some remember well, some don't remember so accurately the dates, but this is the best I was able to come up with, right? The cumulative incidence is extremely low, right? 1%, 2%, right? And in some cases, we never know where the bacteria is coming from, of course, but I think this is very, very good information, very good evidence in that, is it really that transmissible, right? And I think Dr. Maria Peters has already taught us many things about it, that it doesn't move that quickly. And does it fly? Maybe it can fly, right? But it doesn't look like it's doing it very efficiently, right? Because the number of new cases is pretty low. The interesting thing is that even though we're talking about sow farms, we still need to look at the other portion of the industry, which is the growing pig, right? Of course, we don't have data. Maybe that's something that we will tackle later on, right? But we suspect it's pretty low, right? And remember, the SDRS data kind of provide us with that evidence, right? That we cannot find it. So for those of you that are not aware, Dr. Yeski had this abstract, he submitted this abstract to the IPVS in 2018, in which he followed some of those growing pigs that were in Minnesota, others in northern Iowa, and they ran serology on those groups of pigs, right? And if you look at it, the number of positives is pretty low, right? It's pretty low, which again brings more evidence to say lateral introductions may not be a very frequent event. Therefore, the elimination programs, if you are concerned with a rebreak or not, odds are that you're going to be successful, right? So I think this is one more piece of evidence that I think getting rid of mycoplasma, besides being a good thing for your production flow, is going to be something that is going to last for quite a long time, right? So the risk is not like we have it with PRRS. I think this is lower risk. Now, just to give you some final thoughts here, prevalence is at 11%. Just remember, this number may change in a few weeks as I get more data. The other thing is that 25% of the positive herds may get rid of mycoplasma in the next year, half a year, year and a half. Hopefully those elimination protocols, elimination programs are successful, which they have been proven to be successful. Now, the other thing is that cumulative incidence is pretty low. Again, it's safe to eliminate it even if you are in high dense regions, right? We're seeing that data. And of course, next time we show this data, I hope to give you a bit more, right, of what our understanding of mycoplasma in the state is, so that we can, again, continue that momentum so that we can not only make it a Minnesota, but maybe a multi-state nationwide, hopefully, down the road. I would like to acknowledge, of course, the Minnesota Pork Board, of course, our leader, the Jill Ressler, and then the team within that task force, of course, for trusting us with this project. The Mycoplasma Hyopneumoniae Committee or Subcommittee led by Dr. Tom Wetzel, and then the group of individuals participating in it. And of course, my team, the producers, veterinarians for the patients and for the willingness to share this data, right? And of course, funding from the Minnesota Pork Board was used for this project. And with that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions.
For mycoplasma than what you monitored with what you know?
That's a good question, Spencer. And we think that there's going to be a portion of that 37 that may be negative, and a portion, especially the smaller producer, might be positive. So I think that number may increase a bit, but I think there might be some positives in there. Yeah. So Hey, we'll see. I think it's the larger the farm, the higher the likelihood that it'll be negative, hopefully. But we'll have to find out maybe with testing down the road. But that's a great question.
Cesar, can you elaborate on the type of reporting that you are getting, from the participants of MSHIMP? Is that based on diagnostics? Is that based on clinical presentation? And how often are you going to be updating this? I mean, like, for PERS, maybe it is weekly, right? But for Myco, what are the plans?
So I'll start with the last part first, Maria. So we haven't set up a frequency interval as far as reporting is concerned. I think that's something that needs to be talked about. I don't think that's going to be, we can do it weekly, but because there's not that much activity, we can do it monthly, right? So that would be one. Two, I believe some of the systems do some sort of monitoring. So the statuses of that I'm showing, I think they're going to be based mostly on the monitoring, and of course, some clinical will go into that. So I think there's going to be a mixture. But of course, it would be a mistake if we wouldn't do any testing, right? Just so that we can make sure that we're not missing it. Now, eventually, it'll show up clinically, but I think that's something that needs to be fine-tuned down the road. So, yeah. I believe there were some that were willing to give us the status of the board stats. I mean, we can add it. I don't think that'll be a big problem because there's not going to be that many board stats in Minnesota. So I think that'll be a low-hanging fruit as well. But my hunch is that they may be negative as well, right? They might be coming from myco-free multiplication farms. But again, we have to find that one out.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Corzo.